Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the About Small Business podcast. This is the 22nd edition of the podcast. If you're enjoying what we're doing, if you could give us a like and a subscribe, and also hit the little notification bell, and that will let you know any time a new podcast drops. I'm excited for this edition of the podcast because I'm actually going to be speaking to Judy Mohebbyan of Judith Mohebbyan Artwork. I love artwork myself. I think, as you'll be able to see in this camera, you can see some of Judy's artwork here. I absolutely love it. So the abstract kind of idea. So Judy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
It's I love your artwork.
Thank you.
And so with this kind of business, is this a childhood passion that's turned into a business for you?
Yeah, I've always done something arty. Used to do a lot of sketching, a lot of colouring with colour pencils, watercolours. My dad's an artist, and he taught art and CDT at school.
So your dad was an art teacher as well?
Yes.
So does he do much now, or?
Yes, he's still, I mean, bless him, he's retired, and I think he's just as busy now with all us, but yeah, he's still more landscapes.
Right, so a bit more traditional.
Yeah, it does do a bit of abstract, but more geometric abstract.
Right.
But yeah, and he loves this.
So he's proud of you then, proud of what you're doing.
Really encourages it. You know, you hear a lot of stories about people that, you know, you need to get a proper job, and he has really encouraged me all the way.
I think that's really interesting when you say your proper job.
Yeah.
And it's what is a proper job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's and you know, I think, I don't know how you feel about this actually, but I kind of feel that recently art hasn't really been encouraged as much as it possibly has been in the past. And obviously one of my own passions is music. And I remember when I was a teacher, I remember a parents' evening. I was an English teacher, but I remember someone saying, "Oh, we've got music next. That's another waste of time subject." Yeah. And your heart sinks, and it's like, you know, it's. I don't know with the arts in general, if it's something that you either get or you don't. Is that something you've thought much about?
I've thought about it on the score of now with having a teenage daughter and her at school, and I was looking at a timetable actually just recently, and I saw it was like maths and English every day.
Yeah.
Even geography and history twice a week now.
Mm.
And yet art, music, once a week. And I thought, I wonder why. The maths and English I do get. I think, you know, they are the basics.
Yeah, that's the cornerstone, isn't it?
But why are they not given as much credence as other subjects?
I honestly don't know, because I know certainly with recent changes in education, they were trying to make state schools a lot more like private schools.
Right.
Now, in my business, I visit lots of schools, travelling all over the country, and I visit lots of fee-paying schools. Yes. And the biggest difference, kids are lovely everywhere. Mm-hmm. Kids are the same.
Yeah.
Wherever you go, you get lovely kids. You get kids that are maybe a bit more lively, perhaps a little more difficult to manage. But kids are predominantly they're just like people.
Yeah.
Because they are people.
Yeah.
The biggest difference that I noticed at these schools was that in the fee-paying schools, the kids were carrying instruments. Mm-hmm. They were dressed in sports kit, more often than not, and the walls, much like your walls, are covered in amazing artwork.
Right.
And that's the biggest difference I've noticed. I don't know why we've not got more of a push or more of an appreciation that this can help.
Yeah, I really thought things would change with COVID. I really thought that there would be, you know, that there was all this talk of, you know, so much is emphasised on academia, and and not everybody is cut out for that, and it's like nothing's changed. Well, you know, at the
No,
end of the
it's
day,
everyone's just been there's been a rush to go back to what it was like.
Yeah.
It's so I mean, sort of for your own school days, I mean, were you encouraged with art at school or?
the art teacher,
Yeah.
yeah, but not really. Everything was emphasised on maths, English, science,
Yeah.
and to do well in them, and that was it.
Yeah. So I mean, you've told me in a previous conversation you didn't really enjoy school, did you?
I hated school. Yeah, it was a tough time.
It's a shame. I think sort of with people, it's such a common thing that people don't have that positive experience of school. And again, I think art and music could make a massive difference in that respect.
Yes.
And that's why I do think that's a shame. So I mean, what was it that you didn't like about school?
I struggled with the work, but being shy and quiet and timid, I just kept my head down. And a lot of my school reports say Judith is polite but very shy and quiet and would do well if she had more confidence. And it was like, 10 years old, how do you become confident without the help?
I suppose it's better than must try harder.
Yeah.
Which is the other one, I think.
And I think I just got by, just kept my head down and got through it. But it was hard, and bullying as well.
So school wasn't a positive experience. You've got a degree of bullying there, and I mean, was art something that helped you get through that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I loved art. I can't ever remember not. But also writing. I used to write poetry, and that was a really good release.
I find that interesting, actually, because you said you struggled with the work.
Yes.
It's difficult to sort of picture someone who, with no academic ability, writing poetry, which is it's not the easiest thing to do.
No, I think, and I like a poem that rhymes. Yeah.
It's a skill in itself.
Yeah. But I think, I don't write poetry now, but rhyming is still, actually, when I think about it, it's still a big thing for me now.
Yeah.
In my head, and making things up, and I'll often rhyme. But yeah, I think it was more when it came to if English lessons were all about writing poetries or short creative stories, I would have done great. But give me the punctuation side of things, and
it's I know it's I'm aware of the struggles there, but no, I mean that's interesting. So I mean you have also told me that you're autistic.
Yes.
And obviously when we were at school, there wasn't the support there, was there?
I mean, I'd never even heard of it.
I was going to say, were you diagnosed back then, or?
I was diagnosed last year.
Right.
So it's just been a very recent thing. I was diagnosed with ADHD the year before.
Right.
But that's been more on the side of more the concentration rather than. I've got a hyperactive brain, just not hyperactive in person. And I think, I mean, when I look back to school days, my goodness, it's no wonder I struggled.
Yeah.
But it's one of them things, yeah.
But so I mean, once you left school, what then?
So I left school with no qualifications at all. When people say, I mean, I didn't even get a C. And basically, my only options really were either go back to college and do my GCSEs again, which there was no way, or YTS, youth training schemes, and that's what I decided to do. But you basically had two options. You either went into retail or office work. Well,
right.
Office work would have, I'm more of a, as much as my brain's hyperactive, I'd rather do something physical rather than sitting behind the desk.
Yeah. I suppose office in a way is a little bit more like school as well, and if your experiences that aren't the best, then it's that may be okay. And did you enjoy the retail side?
Well, it was more when we got to the crunch of it, it was like I wanted to work with animals.
Okay.
And when I sat and had a chat with someone, that was what came up. Now, I was really fortunate that there was a dog grooming parlour that they'd worked with in the past, and because they sold like leads, bones, things like that, I was able to get my placement at the dog grooming parlour because of that. So I actually, the lady the couple that ran it took me on, and I did I started my YTS. I never actually finished it.
Okay. Were there any consequences to that for not finishing it, or?
Well, it was them that I had a breakdown, bit of a breakdown.
Right. Okay.
And had to go on the sick, and because I'd been on the sick, I can't remember how long I was on the sick. It was a long time ago. They took me off the scheme, but the people that I'd had the placement with offered me a job, that they were, got on really well with them. They were happy with what I was.
I mean, you must have performed fairly well because.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a bit of a breakdown, but yeah, I loved the way that they also bred and showed dogs, and
yeah.
I was able to. They lived in a flat above the shop. I saw a couple of puppies being born. My mum went with them, with Jenny when she was showing one of her dogs at I mean, she'd been at Crufts and everything. My mum had gone with her to Birmingham when there'd been a dog show. Really lovely couple, really lovely.
They sound it, to be honest, and obviously just good employers.
Yeah.
But as I say, you must have been a good employee to show that faith in you, and
I think.
And to earn that support, which I think is what you must have done.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they'd moved up from somewhere down south. They were kind of finding their feet up here. And I think I was young. I worked hard, and I think when you enjoy something, you learn it easier.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, as much as I've no qualifications in dog grooming, I picked it up, especially the poodles. I could do a great poodle top knot. But yeah, it was a hard time, but a nice time in my life then.
So what caused you to part company with?
So I grew up in Leeds. I was born up here, but from age 3, I grew up in Leeds, and we moved back up here when I was 15, and I wanted to be back in Leeds. I felt my life was there.
Yeah.
So the only reason why I left the dog grooming was because I moved out and moved back down to Leeds.
Did you have a job lined up in Leeds, or just moved back thought?
Yeah, I mean, I was 17.
World's your
didn't
oyster.
have a clue, really. But I struggled. I really struggled.
I mean, it's quite a brave thing to do. I mean, that's very young to be, I suppose, breaking out on your own.
Yeah.
Without the, I mean, I left home at 18, but I was then going on to college, to university. So there was at least that structure in place put there for me and people like me to just kind of up and move to a different place. That's a really brave thing for someone who's presented themselves so far as sort of fairly shy. You actually, there's you know, the brevity involved there. That's quite impressive. So
I didn't stay there long.
so, I mean, to even take the chance though. So I mean, what happened in Leeds?
I struggled depression. I mean, I'd been diagnosed with depression when I was 15, and anxiety even a lot younger, and I didn't cope well. It was a tough time, and it was actually I fell pregnant, and my parents that were still up here said, move back up here so we can support you, give you some support. So I had my son when I was 20. 10 days after having him, I made the move and moved back up.
Right.
Back up to the
You're surrounded by your
northeast.
family for the support.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. And so that's a lot going on. So what then for you?
Having my son he made me. I was in a bad place, and he was somebody that needed me, that relied on me, and
So giving you that sense of purpose.
yeah. And then when he was 2, 3, I caught flu, and I mean, well, you know, you people say, "Oh, I've got a cold and I've got flu," and it's like, oh, when I had flu, I couldn't walk. I think it must have been, maybe it's a bit worse than flu, but I was ill, flu symptoms, and I never recovered. I never fully got over it, and it turned out, I think it was about 8 years later, I was diagnosed with ME.
Right.
But it took 8 years of back and forth to the doctor. There's something not right. Why am I sleeping all the time? Why have I no energy? Why, after any little thing, I'm just exhausted and in pain? And the doctor, oh, it's just depression. It just makes you tired. And no, it was ME. But it was actually my auntie had been diagnosed years and years before, and I was chatting with my mum one day, and she says, do you know, that sounds exactly like what Chris has got. So I went back to the doctor, and they referred me to see somebody, and
So there's a few conditions there then that and I'm assuming probably not having those diagnosed is the cause of the depression and the anxiety. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, certainly a big contributing factor. Yeah, it does run in the family. We do have family history, but
is it diagnosed with the family history, or is it sort of relatively fresh?
Some family, but generation. You know, like I know my dad would talk about his dad would have these black moods. So I think there's been a history there, but obviously back in them, I mean,
it wasn't really talked about, was it?
It's nothing. Yeah. It's always been you get on with it. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on for you. I mean, at what stage after through this did you have any other jobs, or were you just focusing on your son? Or
So I'd done a bit of volunteer work in a charity shop, and nothing much. And then I got married in 2007. And the following year, I'd seen an advertisement in the paper for dog groomer wanted part-time. My son was much older then, and I, go for it. So I applied, and I thought, I mean, I'd only done it for like 18 months, many moons ago. but it kind of came back to me. And I
Yeah.
know in the interview where she was like, right, I want to see what you can do. And it had changed, had the style. But I think them basic skills were still there. So I was able to get back into it. But I found it wasn't like when I was working doing the YTS after I'd left school. It was a very different atmosphere, and I found it hard to navigate.
Right. So a bit tougher.
Yeah. So I did that maybe as a year and left. I couldn't hack it. But I mean, at the time I was married, my husband was able to support us. So yeah, but it was another really hard time.
You're going through an awful lot, I think, sort of since leaving school up until this point, until you've even got a diagnosis for your ME. And you mentioned you're writing poetry at school to help you cope. You're enjoying your art. Did you continue with throughout this time? Were you still writing poetry, or
writing poetry? No, that I'd stopped a long time ago. As far as the artwork, I was dabbling in it, not like I'd been, but I was also, I'd found other creative outlets that I liked. I enjoyed card making, scrapbooking. I went through a big phase of really getting into scrapbooking, making things. I mean, saying that, when I think back, after I had my son when he was little, I did a couple of college courses. I'd done one in ceramics,
right,
and one in soft furnishings, just at the local college, just, you know, like basic thing. And I'd enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I got into crocheting. So there's always been some kind of creative outlet in some form.
What made you stop writing poetry?
There wasn't any conscious decision. I think it was a case of it got me through that time. It was, you know,
right,
and then I found other ways of coping. Maybe it's like a coping strategy.
Yeah, and that's what I find interesting, because obviously, it, as you say, it got you through, and it presumably worked, but then but you've not gone back to it, which is.
I have thought about it actually just fairly recently about. I've been looking in ways to help my well-being, and obviously journaling is a big thing. But when it's quite overwhelming, the different ways, and then I have these ideas. I'd love to do this, but then how do I put that into practice? But I thought, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be how the world says it should be, you know. And I have thought about, well, why not try doing it as a way of writing poetry and have that as a way of journaling. I think with the paintings that they're so, when people say what inspires you, and so many things inspire me, but most of them are what I'm feeling at that time. And so I see that as a way of poetry. So it's a release, it's getting what's inside out.
Yeah.
And people interpret it how, for them, in their way.
What they see within it, and that's the beauty of art. So at what stage then did art become a thing for you? You thought, right, I'm going to give this a go.
It was during lockdown. I'd for a few years I'd been making cold processed soap, natural soap, and I like to do things where it was using colours and making patterns in the soap. And I remember I was watching a YouTube channel and somebody making soap, and they were like, oh, it's a bit like an acrylic pour painting. And it was like, So I wrote it down for something. I need to look into that. And I YouTubed it, and it was like, wow, that I really want to have a go at that. But I found when there's something I want to do, from the idea to actually doing something, it takes me a while. I need time to process things. So I watched countless YouTube videos, read lots of different articles, and then in lockdown, I'll go for it. And I had thought about making a business out of making soaps, bath bombs, but there's so many legalities to that. It's a really complex thing, and I thought if I could just make them, that'd be great. But you have to have assessments. There's a lot that goes into it. And I thought, you know what, I really, and after a few months, it was like, my goodness, I could see the improvement in myself.
Yeah.
And I sold a painting within, I think, less than a year. Actually, after I first started pouring.
So what year was this then? Was this still during lockdown or?
Yeah, it was 2020. I poured my first painting, and the following year I sold a painting, and then it was like, oh, I sold a painting. I'm gonna have to set. Do you know what? Thinking about it, wasn't no, it was the same year.
Right.
Because it was the following year. It was like, I've sold a painting, I need to, and it was at the start of the year, it was like, I need to do something about setting this up as a business because I've sold, and I didn't realise that, just selling one painting is not a business.
How did that feel though, someone buying your artwork, something you created, someone prepared to pay you money for it?
Oh, it was exhilarating. I'd actually sold a painting many years ago. In my early 20s, I'd gone to stay with a friend who lived near one of the beaches, somewhere in Yorkshire. I don't know if it was Filey or Whitby. And I'd taken my watercolours and I'd sat on the beach and painted, and a young couple had been people kept coming over and having a look, and they said, do you sell them? And it was like, oh my goodness, I mean, it was horrendous, and it was like, oh no. And they said, it's just that this is my girlfriend, her grandma has got one of the caravans that overlook this scene, and she's getting too old to manage, and she's selling it, and this is her last weekend, so she would love this,
lovely story,
painting the view of, so, and it was like, I was about halfway through, and so it was like, come back in an hour, and then I was like, oh my goodness, what have I, and then
pressure to finish it,
on. And are they going to come back? And they did. And so they're like, well, how much? And I didn't have a clue. And I says, well, whatever you think. He says, £5. And it was like, yeah, go on. So, and I mean, that was, I couldn't wait to tell me dad, but yeah, so it was still now, somebody by something that I've created, it is such a buzz that's come from me, and they love it enough they want to pay money for that.
I imagine, because I mean, just from everything that you've told me, you're not someone that's really pushes herself forward. You're not someone that's like got lots of confidence, and that must just reassure you about your own ability and capability.
Yeah, very much. That there's lots of things that I struggle with and I find hard, but there's some things that and I can. It's something that I am proud of.
Yeah. Quite right too. One thing that you did say earlier on, which I found quite fascinating, is you said you poured your first painting. Now, I'm pretty sure that most people wouldn't assume that you pour paintings. That's not a way.
Yeah.
That wouldn't do. So clearly there's something a little bit more unique about your process. Can you perhaps tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't use paintbrush. I might go in afterwards with a paintbrush and tweak things. But basically it is fluid, so it's all acrylics, but mixed with different additives to get it to like a fluid consistency. And then there's different techniques for getting it on the canvas. Such as this behind it, it was like a cup and pouring different colour paints into the cup and then pouring it on the canvas and then tilting the canvas till it's covered. And it's funny because a lot of people, do you know, how easy is that? Anybody could do that. And then they've had a go and said, actually, it's not as easy as it, you know. There's so much involved. But for me, one of the things I think, because of my history with my health, I like to feel I'm in control.
Yeah.
And I find it really hard and disconcerting when I'm not. And with fluid art, you can control what colours you use, you can control what additives you mix with the paint to get it fluid, you can control how thick you have the paint, you can control how you put the paint on the canvas and how you move the canvas. But once you don't have control, you give up control, the paint does what it wants. And it's a good way of letting go of control.
Yeah.
And you have something like this at the end of it. I don't know, it's hard to describe because there's that release, there's that. Some turn out horrendous, even out. Some turn out amazing. Not very few turn out what I have in my mind, what I picture before I start. But it's amazing. It really is, because you don't know what you're going to end up with. So yeah, it's giving up control, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Is in a safe way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got your own website now as well, haven't you?
Yes.
What's your website domain?
JudithMohebbyan.co.uk.
Right. So how that's kind of throwing yourself into it then, from you selling the painting.
Yeah.
At what stage did you decide, right, I need a website?
Quite early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find social media hard. I had Facebook years ago and found it really hard. So I when I came to close my account, they asked me if I still wanted to keep Messenger, and I thought, well, that's a good way of communicating with people, but without having to go through all the gumph of Facebook. And I did have an Instagram account, personal account at one point, but I never. Often I hear, you know, business advice: turn off your phone, keep off social media, and just get on, you know, to be productive in the tasks that you need to do. I don't have a hard time keeping off social. I don't sit and scroll on social media at all. I tend to.
That's got to be a good thing.
Go on, post what I need to.
Yeah.
See a few things other people are posting, give them a little like, and come out with there. It does nothing for me.
But the website works for you though.
Yeah, I'm not having to post every day, think of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's there. And the different aspects of what I do in the business is there, because as well as doing the paintings, I also do workshops. I
was just going to ask, sort of, what other services do you offer, sort of, around from your website?
I mean, I do commissions on the paintings.
Yeah.
So I've had people, you know, like my decor is this, or I'm redecorating with these colours. I want this kind of size, these colours. But I also do brand. I've just started doing brand painting, so people that, you know, like their brand colours.
All right.
Doing paintings for them in their brand colours, so that it's something unique for their business.
Yeah.
But I also do workshops.
What would your workshop involve?
Basically, I start off, and it's in groups already established. I don't come and book a workshop. I go into like workplaces or groups already established.
Right.
And because the focus is on well-being and art, I share a bit about my background and how I got into it, and how it's helped my well-being. I do a demonstration, and then everybody gets to have a go at creating a painting and see what it's like. Yeah.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes maybe not so much.
Yeah. Some people, but it's great when I know I did a workshop at school, and one of the teachers said to me, right, my living room, the colours are like this, so how you know, best way to do it, because I want that. And she was so proud of it, and it was like, do you know, that's what it's about. And I know there'd been some of the teaching staff had come in late. I'd already done the demonstration, and people were just gathering the things to make their own painting, and some had come in late, and they'd been on a school trip.
Yeah.
And a residential. And after the after the workshop was over and I was clearing things away, one of them came up to me and she said, you know, she says, I was awake till 4 o'clock this morning. One of the children were homesick and having to deal with that. And they'd been to York. She says the traffic was horrendous. We were late at getting back. She says, and the last thing I wanted to do was come and paint. She says, I just wanted to go home, have something to eat, a glass of wine. She says, and you know what? She says, I'm so pleased that this was on. She says, because it was relaxing and yet it was rejuvenating. She says, and I'm really pleased I got to have this experience, because if I'd just gone home, I would have relaxed, but I would have, she says, but with this, she said, I feel rejuvenated with it, and yet it was relaxing. And it was like, that's what it's about. Yeah, it really.
How did you become aware of this process then?
YouTube.
Really? So you just found it on YouTube randomly?
Yeah, watched countless videos. I think that's why I struggled in the classroom. Somebody writing things on a blackboard, and I need to be shown, and I found that I learn better when I'm shown. So
YouTube videos, bit of inspiration, bit of encouragement, and that's turned into a fully fledged business. That's fantastic, and as I say, a very nice one as well. Nicely diversified from your website, and hopefully a brighter future than now. You know who you are, you know about how to manage and what's going to make you feel better. Judy, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.